I still remember the first month my credit card didn't go back to zero. Nothing dramatic happened, no emergency, no blown tire. I just had a couple higher bills than usual, and when the statement closed, there was a balance sitting there. $400-something. I remember thinking it was kind of fine, temporary, like leaving a light on in the other room. I told myself I'd knock it out next month. And the strange part is how calm that felt. Almost comforting, actually. Like the card had stepped in to help me out. No stress, no panic, no feeling of danger. That's what sticks with me now. Debt didn't arrive as a problem. It arrived as relief. And because it didn't hurt, because nothing felt broken yet, I didn't really mark the moment. I just moved on. Paid the minimum, made coffee, went to work. And something quietly shifted without asking permission. I noticed how careful the language around debt always is, even mine. I used to say things like, I've got it under control, or I'm paying it down, or my favorite, it's not that bad. Those phrases sound responsible. They sound like adulthood. And when the minimum payment is, say, $95 a month, it genuinely feels manageable, especially when rent is over $1,000 and groceries keep creeping up. That's where the trick is. Debt presents itself as something you're actively handling, not something growing in the background. I remember months where I paid exactly what I was supposed to and felt weirdly proud, even though the balance barely moved. It took a while to realize I was confusing movement with progress. I was doing something every month. I just wasn't actually going anywhere. And that realization didn't feel dramatic. It just sat there uncomfortable once I finally noticed it. The minimum payment always felt like a kindness, like the system was being reasonable with me. $90, $110, something that fit neatly into the month without forcing any real changes. I didn't think much about what that number meant beyond whether I could cover it. It wasn't until much later that I did the laziest math imaginable. A balance around $6,000, interest over 20%, and suddenly the timeline stretched out in a way that made my stomach drop. Not forever, just long enough to feel uncomfortable. 10 years. More if nothing changed. That's when it stopped feeling like a bill and started feeling like time. Like chunks of future months already spoken for. And I remember thinking how strange it was that I'd avoided that math for so long. Not because it was hard, because I didn't want to sit with what it implied. At some point, the balance stopped feeling like a number. It turned into background noise. Something I knew existed but didn't really register emotionally anymore. I'd open the app, glance at it, feel a tiny pinch of discomfort, and then my brain would move on. I'd make coffee, scroll a bit, get dressed. It's wild how fast the mind can normalize things that would have scared you a year earlier. Debt became furniture in my life. Always there, never questioned. I didn't feel reckless, I felt adjusted. And that might have been the most dangerous part, because once something becomes normal, you stop asking whether it should be. You stop wondering what it's costing you beyond the obvious. You just accept it as part of the room you're living in. I kept upgrading little things during that time. Nothing flashy, just slightly better versions of everyday stuff. A nicer phone plan, more delivery nights, saying yes to the premium option because it was only $20 more. Those decisions felt earned. I was working. I was tired. I deserved small comforts. And with debt already there, those upgrades felt less serious somehow. What's another $40 when the balance is already 4 digits? That's the logic I didn't say out loud. Years later, I added some of it up. 60 here, 35 there. Suddenly it was thousands. Not from one bad choice, from dozens of reasonable ones. And I remember feeling surprised, which is embarrassing, because the math wasn't hiding. I just wasn't looking at it all together. Interest is strange because it never announces itself. Rent shows up loudly. Gas prices glare at you. Interest just happens. I remember one year realizing I'd paid over $1,000 in interest alone. And I couldn't tell you a single thing I got for it. No memory attached, no object, no experience. Just gone. Weeks of work converted into nothing tangible. That bothered me more than I expected. Not in an angry way, in a tired way. Like realizing you've been carrying something heavy for miles without noticing. and now your shoulders hurt. It's a weird feeling to know you've been working for something you can't point to, something that never made your life better in any visible way. Having credit always made me feel safer than I actually was. Knowing it was there, knowing I could swipe if something happened, gave me a sense of stability. Like I had a backup plan, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that safety was rented, borrowed peace of mind. I was paying monthly for the feeling that things wouldn't fall apart. And that feeling was expensive. Debt didn't fix fragility. It covered it up. It made things look smoother on the surface while adding pressure underneath. I didn't notice that trade-off at first. It just felt like relief. Like I was being responsible by having access to funds. It took time to see that access and security aren't the same thing. Debt also made it easier to keep up. Same restaurants, same trips, same casual spending as everyone around me. I didn't feel behind. And that mattered more than I realized. Nobody could see the balances. They just saw me showing up, ordering, participating. There's a quiet comfort in not standing out. And debt is very good at smoothing that over. It lets you blend in. I don't think I was trying to impress anyone. I just didn't want to feel different. Looking back, it's uncomfortable to admit how much of my spending was about maintaining normalcy, about not being the one who always said no. Debt made that easy, and it quietly took the hit for me instead. I leaned hard on future money, raises that hadn't happened yet, bonuses that might show up, side ideas that lived mostly in my head. I told myself it would all even out later. And to be fair, sometimes more money did come in, but it never arrived alone. It brought new expenses, new expectations, new reasons the balance stayed right where it was. I kept borrowing against a version of myself that didn't exist yet. A calmer, richer future Jake, who would clean everything up. That story felt reasonable at the time, optimistic even. It's only now that I see how often I postponed reality by trusting a future that was already busy. There was a moment when the debt stopped being temporary. I didn't notice it when it happened. There was no line crossed, just a quiet realization later that the balance never dropped below a certain number anymore. It hovered, month after month, like a floor had been installed without asking me. I think that's when things really changed, even though I didn't acknowledge it. Temporary debt asks for patience. Permanent debt asks for endurance. And I slid from one into the other without choosing it. That's the part that still bothers me. Not that it happened so quietly. Once you're already behind, spending starts to feel different. I noticed that prices lost some of their sharpness. $10 didn't register the same way. Neither did 50. The damage felt abstract compared to the existing balance. It's like, once you're underwater, the next wave doesn't feel as threatening. I didn't think of it as giving up. It felt more like resignation, like the rules had shifted, and that numbness compounds because when cost stops hurting, it stops guiding decisions. I didn't realize how much sensitivity I'd lost until I started trying to regain it. And that process was uncomfortable. Debt messes with your sense of time. Monthly payments make everything feel short-term. You focus on this bill, this cycle, this paycheck. Years turn into $12 line items. I remember thinking, it's just $90 a month, not without ever asking how many months that actually was. When I finally stretched the timeline out, it felt wrong. Too long. Longer than I'd emotionally agreed to. Debt compresses the future into pieces small enough to tolerate. And in doing so, it makes long-term costs easier to ignore. I didn't feel trapped. I just felt busy. And that busyness hit a lot. There was a constant low-level tension I carried around that I didn't have a name for. Not panic, not stress exactly, just a hum. Mental math running in the background. Checking dates, timing payments. Wondering if I could move money around to make something work. It was exhausting in a quiet way. I didn't connect it to debt for a long time. I thought that was just adulthood. Just being responsible. Only later did I realize how much energy it was taking. How many thoughts were being spent just keeping things afloat. Debt doesn't just cost money. It costs attention. And attention is harder to replace. Debt also narrowed my world in subtle ways. I'd turn things down without fully admitting why. Opportunities felt heavier. Changes felt riskier, not impossible, just inconvenient enough to avoid. I didn't say I can't do that because of debt. I said, now's not the right time. And that felt true. But over time, those moments stacked up. Flexibility has a price. And debt quietly raises it. I didn't feel trapped. I just felt limited. Like my life had invisible guardrails I kept bumping into. There was a night when I finally added everything up. All of it. Cards, interest, timelines. This is the part I didn't want to look at first. Not because it was shocking, but because it was complete. Seeing the total felt heavier than any single purchase ever had. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't spiral. I just sat there longer than I meant to. Phone dimmed, house quiet. The math didn't accuse me, it just existed. And that silence afterward was louder than I expected. Avoidance had protected me emotionally for years. And in that moment, it stopped working. The shame wasn't explosive. It was dull, private, more disappointment than panic. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. And that almost made it worse. Because there was no villain. Just a lot of small decisions that made sense at the time. I didn't talk about it much. Debt shame doesn't usually ask for help. It asks for quiet, for isolation. I carried it alone longer than I needed to. Not because I was hiding something terrible, because I didn't know how to explain something so normal. Paying debt down didn't feel good at first. That surprised me. The balance moved, but nothing else changed. Life looked the same. My days felt the same. The effort didn't come with relief right away, just discipline. That made it harder than I expected. Working for something you can't see is tiring, especially when the reward is just less pressure, no applause, no upgrade, just fewer numbers on a screen. It took a while to appreciate that kind of progress, and even longer to trust it. There's a strange moment when debt finally feels heavy. Not because it grows, but because you see it clearly. Nothing new happens. No calls, no emergencies, just awareness. And once you have that, it's hard to unsee. Manageable debt becomes something else in that moment. Not terrifying, just serious. I didn't panic. I just stopped pretending it was neutral. And that shift changed how everything felt. Debt took things from me that weren't money. Calm, mental space, spontaneity. I didn't notice their absence until they started to come back. Slowly, quietly. As balances shrank, my thoughts got a little less crowded. Decisions felt lighter, not easier. Lighter. That difference matters. I don't think we talk enough about that cost. Because it doesn't show up on statements. You only feel it when it's gone. Sometimes late at night, I still check balances out of habit. Phone turned down low. House silent. It's strange how debt feels manageable right up until moments like that. When there's nothing else competing for your attention. No noise. No justification. Just a number and the weight you attach to it. I think a lot of people are having that same quiet moment right now. Sitting with something they've been carrying for a long time and maybe not knowing exactly how it got there. I don't have a clean ending for that thought. It just kind of stays with me.